It's been a tough few months for the Democratic Party. The stinging election loss to Donald Trump in November, combined with losing their Senate majority and failing to retake the House, has Democrats devoid of leadership and looking for answers. But today, they say they're feeling buoyed after a convincing win in a hotly contested state Supreme Court contest and overperforming in 2 U.S. House races. Joining me to discuss this and more, Julia Manchester, national political reporter here at The Hill. Julia, let's talk about Florida first, our home state. Republicans held those 2 House seats. Both candidates won by double digits, but the margins were lower than Republican wins in November. Is this a good sign for Democrats across the country that may be eyeing purple states and districts?
Potentially. I think Florida is a different beast, Drew, because we know that Republicans already have such an incredible voter registration advantage in that state, 1.2 million or around that number to be exact. So they already had that going for them going into this. Additionally, this is a special election. So we're coming off of a very grueling presidential election cycle. We're in April, we're in an off year, so the turnout wasn't the same. That being said, though, I do think there are positive signs for Democrats in Florida when it came to them targeting what we call high propensity voters. And these voters tend to be from a more higher socioeconomic bracket. They tend to be highly educated. And we saw them come out in some of these districts, particularly in the 1st congressional district. You know, it was interesting. So much of the coverage was on the 6th congressional district. But I think some of the shocking numbers of the night, the most shocking numbers, came out of the 1st congressional district. So in Escambia County, for example, which is where Pensacola is located, we saw that county flip. This is a county that President Trump won by double digits. The Democrat Gay Vallimont won it by roughly 3 points last night. And that's because Democrats were really able to drive out those higher propensity voters. On the flip side of that, you had Republicans who were struggling to turn out their lower propensity voters, voters who really come out in droves when President Trump is at the top of the ticket. So what Republicans argue is that this is ultimately a special election. It's not top of voters' minds, and their voters, their base, just don't typically turn out for these special elections. So going forward, I think Democrats can certainly take a silver lining out of these official losses in Florida. But at the same time, we have to be careful about how we compare this to the actual midterm elections.
What do you think the impact will be in the House of Representatives? Republicans have those tight margins. Will this provide a little bit of breathing room for Speaker Johnson?
Yeah, it definitely gives some breathing room, some cushioning. We know that Speaker Johnson is under a lot of pressure to pass that budget reconciliation bill that combines the Trump tax cuts as well as energy, as well as border security. And we know that within the Republican conference in the House, there's still some questions as to, who's going to support what. We know that, for example, Congressman Thomas Massie has been a naysayer within that conference. So Johnson needs as much breathing room as possible in order to get this agenda through. And we saw President Trump and, other members of, Florida Republicans, including Congressman Byron Donalds, who's also running for governor in Florida. They were very much pushing that narrative, saying that the House majority depends on, in a way, these 2 seats and Republican voters coming out to vote.
Let's talk about Wisconsin. A liberal won the state Supreme Court race there despite Elon Musk funneling $15 million to her opponent. Musk put on a cheesehead, gave away $1 million checks, lost by 10 points. The liberal candidate Susan Crawford spoke Tuesday night. Let's take a listen to her.
As a little girl growing up in Chippewa Falls, I never could have imagined that I'd be taking on the richest man in the world. And we won.
Going forward, I wonder if the message from Republicans to Elon Musk is going to be, we'll take your money, but please don't come to my district.
Yeah, he certainly put his name and his face on this race. I think more people following this race noticed him more than the Republican Brad Schimmel running in this race. I think his involvement in some ways backfired on Republicans. We saw Democrats really in the last few weeks of this race seek to tie Elon Musk to Brad Schimmel, to President Trump, and the campaign worked. And in many ways, Elon Musk was feeding right into it. Like you said, traveling to Wisconsin, putting on a cheese hat, doing network TV interviews about this state Supreme Court race, saying that this state Supreme Court race, depended, or Western civilization depended on this race. So he really, I think in many ways, did Democrats a favor. I think this race, more so than Florida, offers more promising signs for Democrats. I think it shows that Elon Musk is certainly a foil that they can use. I think you're going to see them use this in subsequent elections in Virginia and New Jersey later this year if Elon Musk gets involved. And I think that's a big if. I think what a lot of us are questioning as to how much Republicans want him in these races after this really big loss for Republicans in Wisconsin.
And President Trump more and more talking about Elon Musk possibly going back to more work with his companies. We'll leave it at that. Julia Manchester, thanks so much.
Thank you.
This is a moral moment. It's not left or right, it's right or wrong. Let's get in good trouble. My friend, Madam President, I yield the floor.
Democratic New Jersey Senator Cory Booker has made history. His 25-hour marathon speech on the Senate floor is now the longest on record. As he held the floor, Booker did not sit or use the bathroom. It's an impressive feat of stamina, no doubt. Booker fasted and dehydrated himself to prepare. But what difference does it make for a party out of power and disliked by many of its own voters? Joining me to discuss, Jesse Byrnes, senior editor here at The Hill. Hey, Jesse, this strikes me as a physical manifestation of what the Democratic base says they want of their politicians, and that is to fight Trump with everything you have.
Yeah, definitely a huge illustration of stamina. The fact that Cory Booker is about to be 56, was able to not eat for 24 hours, drink a little bit of water, but basically wasn't drinking anything, wasn't sleeping at all. He also pulled an all-nighter. That's very difficult to do for even probably you or I at this point, but definitely for someone in their 50s. And to also just have the symbolism of, breaking that record from Strom Thurmond from 1957, who of course was protesting the Civil Rights Act, and to have Cory Booker do that, that symbolism definitely was not lost on him. And speaking to larger, Democrats, they want a bright spot. They want some optimism. They want some juice in the engine. And he certainly uplifted some Democratic spirits with that speech.
We've talked a lot about the lack of a big leadership personality in the Democratic Party. I wonder if you think this positions Senator Booker as one of the main leaders of the Democratic Party, possibly a top contender for 2028.
Booker is definitely well respected among his Democratic colleagues. That was very evident last night, including with the exchange with Chuck Schumer when he said, this is the one time, Chuck, where I'm going to tell you you can't interrupt me. So he is well liked. But does that translate into having the political capital to go forward? Obviously, Booker ran for president in 2020. He struggled with fundraising, struggled in the polling. He didn't make the last debate before the Iowa caucuses and ended up dropping out. And that, more importantly, his message of love and unity, which is very much emblematic of who he is and very genuine, didn't really resonate with Democratic voters in 2020, and that's very much what Democrats, they're not really itching for that right now, it seems. They want someone who's a fighter, someone who's going to bring the fight to Trump and Elon Musk, and so that very much seems where the energy is. But I think Democrats do think that Cory Booker is going to play some role in their future, and he's already out there fundraising for fellow Democrats on behalf of his speech, and so that's very key for trying to position other Democrats to rise up to.
Do you think Democrats are going to continue to go further with this? Booker in that clip said we need to keep getting into good trouble. I wonder if you think we'll see more acts of civil disobedience. I could even see, getting arrested. A Democrat getting arrested could be a powerful messaging tool to the Democratic base that wants them to fight. Do you see kind of more of this type of stunt from the Democrats?
Well, yeah, he's definitely pushing for good trouble, as other kind of civil rights leaders have advocated for decades of trying to push the envelope, but through peaceful demonstrations like we saw in the Senate chamber last night. And so I think you do have a little bit of a contrast with other progressives who are much more vocal, trying to push Chuck Schumer to vote for essentially a shutdown to try to get their message across that they are protesting Trump. That message really hasn't taken a footing in the Senate Democratic caucus, at least at large. There's still a cohort that are resisting that type of pressure. But you're right, Democrats don't have a lot of levers at their disposal to try to protest what's going on. And so I think you're going to see more demonstrations like this, perhaps peaceful, that are trying to push back in ways that are more creative.
I want to talk about this issue in the Senate with the Senate parliamentarian. Republicans are talking about possibly bypassing the parliamentarian in their quest to pass their agenda without Democratic votes. This all has to do with the price tag of the bill that they're trying to pass. The question is, does extending Trump's 2017 tax cuts amount to new spending, or is that the baseline to go from? Traditionally, it would be the parliamentarian to make that call. Republicans say the law allows the Senate Budget Chairman, Lindsey Graham, to decide. Democrats accuse the Republicans of blowing up the Senate. This is a terrible thing. How big of a deal do you think it is?
Well, Democrats are definitely warning this is, they're going nuclear by essentially bypassing the rules and procedures that the precedent that lawmakers from both parties have abided to in recent years. And the reason that Republicans are in this tough spot is because they're trying to pass Trump's agenda, this mammoth bill, through budget reconciliation. So instead of the 60 votes that you typically need to advance, you can advance it through budget reconciliation with a simple majority. But that then gives the Senate parliamentarian the option to say, does everything in this actually have to do with spending in the budget? And so they're essentially trying to, it seems like, bypass the Senate parliamentarian. That has repercussions for the future when Republicans are in the minority and Democrats have control of the White House and control of the Senate. But right now, that doesn't seem to be deterring Republicans at all. They're pressing ahead. Fiscal hawks inside Congress and outside Congress are warning this essentially is obscuring about $4 trillion in deficit spending by extending those 2017 Trump tax cuts without trying to count it against the actual accounting.
I want to quickly ask you about what's happening over at HHS. A bunch of layoffs were announced starting yesterday, 10,000 employees in total. It goes from top officials to rank and file. Some former officials have been warning that the brain drain presents a risk to both public health and the healthcare economy. Seems like this is another example of we're going to find out whether these federal bureaucracies are necessary or not.
Absolutely. And we've seen people like Scott Gottlieb, the former FDA commissioner, who have come out and really warned against how the repercussions for this when it comes to, the FDA, for example. The United States has really led in recent years when it comes to approvals for certain drugs and really being on the frontier, even surpassing Europe when it comes to approvals for drugs, and really warning that that could really go away with this gutting of the FDA. Thousands of cuts at the CDC as well, which has ramifications for infectious disease research as well, and it cuts. One thing to watch here is, does private industry respond in kind? It takes years to build up these agencies to attract the best and brightest talent, and now that many of these people are moving outside of government, does that lead to some type of companion in the private sector? Do we see research departments at universities bolstered? Do we see private industry and company, try to attract this talent? Because now you have a lot of people who were in positions of key research, both the rank and file, but also leading certain agencies and offices within the CDC and HHS. Now they're available, and where do they go with those talents and that knowledge?
A big shakeup. Be key to watch how that develops. We'll leave it at that. Jesse Byrnes, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Drew.
This case should have never been brought, and I did nothing wrong. I'm now happy that our city can finally close the book on this and focus solely on the future of our great city.
Breaking news out of New York City. A federal judge has dismissed the criminal case against Mayor Eric Adams. The case has been dismissed with prejudice, ensuring the charges cannot be refiled against the embattled mayor. The news comes after the Trump administration's Department of Justice requested that the case be dismissed against Adams. The DOJ previously requested the charges be dropped without prejudice, allowing them to possibly be refiled at a later date. Adams was charged last year on allegations that he solicited and accepted bribes from wealthy foreign business people and at least one Turkish government official. He was charged with 5 counts, including bribery, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and solicitation of a contribution from a foreign national. Oral arguments at the Supreme Court today about whether states can block Planned Parenthood from their Medicaid programs. This stemming from South Carolina's decision in 2018 to cut off Medicaid funding for the nonprofit, even for non-abortion services like cancer screenings and birth control. If South Carolina wins, it could pave the way for other states to follow suit. News Nation's Tom Dempsey has the latest on this bid to defund Planned Parenthood.
The oral arguments today brought this scene outside the Supreme Court building. 2 sides separated by barricades. One of them here on the left-hand side raising some big concerns about that order in South Carolina banning Medicaid dollars from going to Planned Parenthood. But on the other side, we have pro-life supporters holding up a sign saying defund Planned Parenthood. And to show the importance of this case, we spoke to people who came in to be here in D.C., people who came in from New Jersey, Texas, one woman from Kentucky, to walk people through this case that might not be familiar with it. It stems out of South Carolina, where the Republican governor, Henry McMaster, he issued an order to keep public health care dollars from going to Planned Parenthood. Supporters of that push say tax dollars should not go to facilities that offer abortion services, and states should be able to choose where to direct their Medicaid program dollars. But opponents of all that say this goes beyond abortion, and it would hurt low-income women and families that rely on Planned Parenthood for vital health care, including cancer screenings. And to that point, in the group's annual report in 2023, Planned Parenthood said abortion services made up less than 5% of its work. In its most recent annual report, it said STD testing and treatment, and as well as contraceptive services, made up the vast majority of its care. As this case was heard, though, News Nation spoke with people from both sides.
So I don't believe tax dollars should be going to something that is not helping women, not helping children, not helping anyone. So I firmly believe they want to do that, support themselves, build their own funds, but not the tax dollars funds to hurt women and children.
So many people rely on Planned Parenthood and on Medicaid for their health, for their insurance, and so we need to have the choice to go to Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood provides so much more than abortion.
And with oral arguments now wrapped up, many people will be watching when this decision comes down from the Supreme Court, likely in the months ahead.
News Nation's Tom Dempsey, thank you. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.